The entire office fell silent when 32-year-old CEO Rebecca Hart pointed toward the elevator and fired single father Michael Bennett in front of everyone. Michael stood frozen beside his desk, holding a cardboard box against his chest, while dozens of employees watched in uncomfortable silence. He had spent 7 years building that company from the ground up, working late nights, fixing problems nobody else wanted, and quietly giving everything he had to provide a better life for his 9-year-old son, Noah. But Rebecca saw only numbers on a performance report. She did not know that Michael had spent the previous night sitting beside his son's hospital bed after the boy developed a severe asthma attack. She did not know he had arrived at work that morning after sleeping for less than 2 hours, and she certainly did not know what he would leave behind on his desk. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone before knowing their story, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when a simple story of compassion might touch a heart that desperately needs it. Michael lowered his eyes, gathered the few things he owned at work, and carefully placed them inside the box. There was an old coffee mug, a photograph of Noah holding a handmade science project, a tiny desk plant, and a worn blue notebook. Rebecca stood several feet away, maintaining the cold expression she had learned to wear since becoming CEO. She had inherited the company after her father passed away unexpectedly, and she was determined to prove that she could lead it without anyone's help. Her father had always warned her that business was not a place for emotions. Numbers mattered. Deadlines mattered. Results mattered. People, she had convinced herself, could be replaced. Michael had once been one of the company's most dependable employees, but over the previous year his life had become increasingly difficult. Noah's mother had died after a long illness, leaving Michael to raise their son alone. He had become both parents overnight. He prepared school lunches before dawn, attended parent-teacher meetings whenever he could, helped with homework at the kitchen table, and learned how to braid Noah's hair badly enough that the boy eventually started doing it himself. Every morning Michael told his son that everything would be okay. Even on mornings when he wasn't sure, he believed it himself. The morning he was fired, Michael had hoped Rebecca might understand why he had missed an important meeting. Instead, she had placed a termination letter on his desk. His hands trembled as he picked up the box, but he refused to cry in front of his coworkers. He thanked the few people who had quietly supported him, then walked toward the elevator with his head held high. Rebecca watched him disappear behind the closing doors, believing she had just made a difficult but necessary business decision. That afternoon, the office slowly returned to normal. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and employees pretended they had not witnessed what happened. Rebecca remained in her office, surrounded by spreadsheets and financial reports, but something about the morning kept bothering her. She couldn't explain why. She had fired employees before, and she had never thought twice about it. Yet Michael's expression as he walked away kept returning to her mind. Near sunset, Rebecca walked through the nearly empty office and stopped at Michael's desk. His computer had already been shut down. The chair was pushed neatly underneath the desk. The little plant was gone. The photograph was gone. But the blue notebook remained. Rebecca picked it up, expecting work notes. Instead, the first page contained a handwritten list titled, "Things Noah Needs." Beneath it were simple reminders: inhaler refill, school lunch money, new winter shoes, science fair supplies, library book, and dentist appointment. Rebecca turned another page and found something that made her stop breathing for a moment. It was a letter Michael had written to his son but apparently never finished. He had written about how proud he was of Noah, how his son had given him a reason to keep going after losing his mother, and how sometimes fathers were scared too. At the bottom of the page, Michael had written one sentence that broke something inside Rebecca. "I may not be able to give you everything, but I promise you will never have to wonder whether your father loves you." Rebecca sat down slowly in Michael's empty chair. For the first time, she realized she had never actually seen the man she fired. She had seen an employee number, missed deadlines, and productivity reports. She had never seen the exhausted father who was trying to keep his family together. She had never asked why he sometimes rushed out of the office. She had never noticed the small hospital bracelet he had been wearing beneath his shirt sleeve that morning. Then Rebecca noticed an envelope underneath the notebook. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a child's drawing. It showed a little boy standing beside his father in front of a large office building. Above them was a bright yellow sun, and beneath the drawing were the words, "My daddy says hard work means never giving up." Rebecca stared at it until tears filled her eyes. She thought about her own father. She remembered how he used to leave handwritten notes in her lunch bag when she was young. She remembered his advice, his patience, and the way he had once told her that the greatest leaders were not the people who could make the most money, but the people who could make others feel that they mattered. She had spent years trying to become the kind of CEO her father would respect. And suddenly, she wondered whether she had become the exact opposite. Rebecca grabbed her coat and rushed out of the building. She found Michael the next morning, outside a small apartment building in Cleveland, Ohio, standing beside an old car with Noah's backpack in his hand. Michael looked exhausted. He had spent the night applying for jobs, but the thought of explaining his circumstances to another employer terrified him. Rebecca stepped out of her car carrying the blue notebook. Michael looked at her with surprise, but before he could say anything, she handed it back to him. She did not come to defend herself. She came to apologize. Rebecca admitted that she had judged him without knowing his story. She admitted that she had confused leadership with authority and strength with coldness. Then she offered him his job back. But not under the same conditions. She had already spoken with the board about creating a family emergency policy, flexible scheduling, and paid emergency leave for employees, caring for sick children or family members. Michael listened quietly. He did not immediately forgive her. Instead, he looked toward Noah, who was standing nearby holding his father's hand. Then he looked back at Rebecca and asked whether those new policies would apply to everyone. Rebecca nodded. That was when Michael finally smiled. Months later, the company began to change. Employees started speaking openly about struggles they had once hidden. Parents no longer felt ashamed when their children became sick. Managers were encouraged to ask questions before making judgments. Rebecca became a different kind of CEO, not softer, but wiser. And Michael returned to work with something he had never had before: peace. One Friday afternoon, Rebecca walked past his desk and saw the child's drawing framed beside his computer. Underneath it, Michael had placed a small handwritten message. Sometimes losing a job is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the moment someone finally sees your worth. Rebecca stood there for several seconds, remembering the man she had once sent away with a cardboard box. She had thought she was firing an employee. Instead, she had been given a lesson. A lesson about fathers who quietly sacrifice everything for their children. A lesson about people who smile while carrying invisible burdens. And most importantly, a lesson about how one moment of compassion can change not only one person's life, but an entire workplace. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and scroll away. Like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel so these stories can continue reaching people who need them. And before the story ends, comment, "Everyone deserves a second chance," if you believe we should try to understand people's struggles before judging them. Because sometimes, the person walking away with a cardboard box isn't a failure. Sometimes they're a tired parent, doing everything they can to keep a little child's world from falling apart. And sometimes, the greatest thing a powerful person can do is simply stop, look closer, and choose kindness.